The indigos are here for huge reasons that our scientists are not even ready to fathom. And we'll talk more about that. Now, if you look at each one of those lines, a strand of DNA, which is a primary flash line sequence of scalar waves that hold the consciousness, each one is a frequency of consciousness. Taurinicium, 12-strand humans, could hold 12 dimensions of consciousness in a hominid form and would have full access to transmutational mastery in 4 harmonics, 12 dimensions of consciousness and of dimensional field, which gives them access to, by the way, 12 dimensions worth of time continuum cycles, because time cycles and time continua are all connected to these flash line sequences. We get a linear time progression because of the orientation of the DNA flash line sequences to that of the dimensional bands, and that's a whole other workshop too. So we'll just get into this for a minute. We have what's called the 12-strand diamond sun silicate matrix DNA pattern. That was the Taurinicium design. Before that, there was something called the double diamond sun, 24-strand DNA matrix. What that meant was, you take a Taurinicium and you take its antiparticle double. You take the 12 strands from here and the 12 from there and you put them together and you get something else entirely. It transmutes to a whole different life form that has the ability to hold 24 dimensions of consciousness. It has the ability to hold the memory banks of particle and antiparticle, Earth, Terra, and Gaia. It has the ability to be simultaneously aware of itself in the various time vectors, not just one single vector consciousness like we have here. When we're dealing with indigos, we can begin to start understanding that by looking visually at the difference between a 12-strand and here is a 24-strand. Some of the indigos are born with this genetic configuration, and they're not the ones with the highest genetic configuration either. Okay? So I'm trying to show you relationships of things here, dimensions to levels of consciousness, so you can understand what indigos are when they come in. We can do heritage now, honey. Thank you. Okay. Now, we're getting to our heritage. This is the part I'm excited about being able to bring out, simply because we have been denied this information for over 200,000 years on this planet. Most of us don't even think there was anything before the Sumerians appeared spontaneously out of nowhere, from what I hear in the history books. We have a heritage that goes back billions of years, but there is a heritage that goes upward, a vertical heritage, not just a heritage down here in harmonic 1 cycles. But in harmonic 2, there was a race that the harmonic 1s came out of. Our harmonic 2 race was the Tauriniciums, and our 12 tribes down here came out of that. Up in harmonic 3, etheric matter density, there was another race that the Tauriniciums came out of. This is where we start to understand indigos. Okay? We have to begin understanding the whole process by realizing that any hominid life form, or that having a human-like type form, began in harmonic 4, pre-matter liquid light density. In the Lyran star system, if we look up in Lyra, that's actually a location in our morphogenetic, in the universal morphogenetic field, in that area of the morphogenetic field, but on the 4th harmonic. And it's a system of liquid light. It's pre-matter before it takes on etheric matter density. It's called the cradle of Lyra. It's also called the Christos. This is where the whole Christ issues come from. It's a level of consciousness, it's a dimensional reality field, a harmonic reality field, that holds the original pattern that the levels of matter density into form were built on. We were all seeded through the cradle of Lyra. And all of the races in this time matrix, believe it or not, and this is where the whole concept of coming out of the one begins to make sense, all of the races came through a seed race that took on hominid form. The seed race came out of something before even hominid form, came out of a collective of consciousness, a gestalt of consciousness. And that goes up into the energy matrix levels, the ultra-terrestrial levels of consciousness we talked about that aren't even dimensionalized anymore. Those ascended mastery levels of identity, they're like cosmic families of consciousness that exist in pure scalar wave form. They're not even dimensionalized anymore. They don't experience space-time matter. They're eternal. We're all connected to them. To understand how life forms got into manifestation in the first place, you need to understand they came out of there. Then they dimensionalized into the dimensional structures, broke themselves down, and created shifting in the flashline sequences to create particle bases and experience of perceivable matter, which is a hologram anyway. In the cradle of Lyra, in our time matrix system, our 15-dimensional system, life was seeded there. And it was seeded primarily, the hominid forms came out of a cosmic family of consciousness that if you take its vibrational rhythm and translate it into sound in the English language, it comes out to the word Melchizedek. There's things about language we don't understand either. That it's all about vibrational rhythms. And those vibrational rhythms are flashline sequences. And those flashline sequences directly interact with our DNA. Okay?
Could you repeat that one more time?
I don't know if I can. I said that so fast, I don't know if I can repeat that one more time. Yeah, can I repeat that? What? What? I'm sorry. Oh, Melchizedek. Okay, that part of it, yes. I can slow that one down and repeat it again. Okay. Okay, Melchizedek is actually a translation of the vibrational pattern of the collective of consciousness, the cosmic family of consciousness that seeded the hominid forms. The flashline sequences, the scalar arrangements, have a sound translation when they're brought down the dimensional scale into light, sound, scalar waves. And when you translate those flashline sequences through the English language flashline sequences, you come out with the sound tones of Melchizedek. And in the Bible, they got as far as identifying King Melchizedek, who came in and did certain things in the biblical history. It goes way beyond that. You know, Melchizedek is a tonal resonance signature for certain aspects of consciousness that link all hominid forms within this 15-dimensional matrix. It's not just a big guy in the sky. It's not a God sitting on the throne that you bow down to. It's completely different than that. Some people interpret Melchizedek as that, Lord Melchizedek. There's certain groups in the New-Age movement that call to Lord Melchizedek to assist them. What a Lord Melchizedek is, it's a level of the ascended mastery consciousness of the hominid race that exists beyond dimensionalization. It's a collective of cosmic consciousness that we're all connected to. You can call it Lord if you want to. I don't like the term personally because for our history it has implied subservience and servitude and really getting the not great end of the stick. Okay? You don't have to call anything Lord and Master. All you have to do is recognize you're directly connected to your own inner master, which is your own level of higher dimensional identity, all the way up through the dimensional scale. Now, to understand how we got to where we are, and to where the indigos fit, where the Turanisium fit, there is a vertical lineage happening here, a vertical progression of flashline sequences, which is a vertical progression of fire letter sequences, which is a vertical progression of DNA code manifestation through the densities down into this one. This is what we need to understand, to begin remembering the truth of our heritage. And in the truth of our heritage, we will begin to understand where the indigos fit into the picture and why they're so important. Okay, now, we have the Melchizedek tonal signature, cosmic gestalt of identity for the hominid forms in this time matrix, sending portions of itself into the dimensions to create individuation, a form of race, to experience dimensionalized creation and space-time matter and those things that that experience creates. Coming down through harmonic 5, okay, is dimensions 15, 14, and 13. Harmonic 5 we call the Rishi level of identity. If you were to perceive a Rishi, first it'd be flattened because the frequency it transmitted would fry you instantly. It looks like a sun. Their spherical identity is beyond the form, that any etheric matter form, any pre-matter form. It is a scalar wave spectra that has the frequencies of a full sphere of energy. Or actually, Rishi has half a sphere, you put two together and you get a whole sphere, 360-degree energy, 360 fire letter sequences. It's all connected. Okay? If we understand the harmonic 5, each of us as individuals has a Rishi collective we're out of, but so does every race. So does every race strain. So does every planet. Everything that comes into matter has this progression of scalar wave patterns that progressively breaks itself down into smaller pieces, and to get back out of here you have to progressively reassemble those pieces in the order that they were broken down in. That's why so many of us are stuck here in the time matrix. The fire letter sequences, the flash line sequences, the DNA patterns are no longer the same patterns that we came in with, and you have to recalibrate and put together the patterns you came in with to get back out. It's as simple as that. Okay, now, in the cradle of Lyra, the Melchizedek family created several groups of beings. The two primary ones involved with our race were called the Elohai, and that's not the same thing as Elohim. That's different. We'll get to that later. The Elohai and the Seraphi. They were both out of the Melchizedek collective, and they were both the first manifestation of individuation of the Melchizedek Rishi into harmonic 4, pre-matter, liquid light Christos. They were avatar collectives, and they created a liquid light form. We all have a level of this form that we can find too, by the way. The Elohai and the Seraphi and the family lines they created in the lower densities were the core of the whole polarity drama we have been involved with for billions of years before the human imprint was created. The stellar races who came out of those families went into issues of polarity imbalance, which creates conflict between beings. Polarity imbalance is basically a physics thing that comes down to balancing electrical and magnetic polarity frequencies. But when it translates into bodily consciousness and scalar wave beings, it turns into conflicts between DNA patterns, flashline sequences, and if you don't have compatibility in flashline sequences, you don't understand each other. This creates conflict in consciousness. And when you have conflict in consciousness, you tend to have things like wars. People down here in harmonic 1 think that if they think about angels and things up there in the higher harmonics, they think, oh, up in the heavens everything is sweet and hunky-dory and peaceful. Well, I hate to tell you, it doesn't get peaceful until you hit dimension 12. There have been interstellar wars for billions and billions of years trying to work out the polarity imbalances between the descendants of these two primary family avatar collectives, the Elohai and the Seraphi. And we are still in the middle of that major cosmic drama. We are products of that cosmic drama because the Turnisium human lineage, was created to try to help resolve it and get the flashline sequences back together, because then the harmonious consciousness would come back. We would start to understand each other again. Even when they talk about the races were all given different tongues, and then they had to figure out how to reassemble and be able to communicate with each other again. What they're talking about is not just languages. Those languages, again, just like the Melchizedek word, are tonal resonance signatures, which are flashline sequences. They were saying right there, even in the Bible, that we were broken down into separate groups of flashline sequences, and to understand each other and become whole again as a race, we had to put them back together into the original whole out of which all of those pieces came. Okay, now we have Elohai and Seraphi up in harmonic 4. That's dimensions 12, 11, and 10. There are other families of consciousness that were involved with seeding other life forms. But the one we need to understand first is the hominid life form, because that's what our consciousness manifested through. Okay? When the avatars of the Elohai and Seraphi began, and they're like creator gods, they knew they had creative power to manifest life forms, and they did. And some of them did, and they mixed this one with that one and that one with this one, and they found that when you mix flashline sequences in the wrong ways, it creates messes in the flashline sequences, which creates messes in the gene codes, which creates a distortion in the codes of ascension, and those beings become trapped in time. And they also go into polarity imbalance and conflict and the whole bit. Many of the Elohai and Seraphi families became what was called fallen, because we hear stories of their fallen angels and all of that. Fallen meant they could no longer expand themselves up and out of matter density because they lost some portion of their original flashline sequences of their design that would allow them to pull their fire letters together and expand back out of the time matrix. The fallen ones also had a fall in consciousness because the codes that were originally part of their makeup that would allow them to pull in the full cognition of the 15-dimensional spectrum in which the law of one is understood, where we understood the whole process that we all came out of one and we're really all one. They lost cognition of that, and they began to see each other as separate and something to fight with. They forgot they were part of each other, and they took different stances. These wars of the heavens came way before the wars on earth, and they still are ongoing. Now, out of those two families, the Melchizedek cloister, all right, which is like the highest level of the Melchizedek signature that retains the full codes of ascension all the way up through the 3 levels of the energy matrix, beyond the 15-dimensional scale, those 3 other levels, the triadic, polaric, and echadic levels. There are other sets of fire letter sequences. They're part of the Melchizedek cloister, collective that holds that sequence as the potential so everything can get back out of time eventually, is called the cloister, the Melchizedek cloister. The Melchizedek cloister cosmic identity collective, knowing it had all these pieces of itself fragmented into the time matrix, holds those codes So they can give those codes back so the pieces of themselves stuck in the time matrix can re-evolve back into expansion, into being part of that cosmic family of consciousness. Now, the Elohai families of these two families were commissioned by the Melchizedek Cloister Collective to be in the time matrix, to be the one race line that would hold the original codes of ascension, the original full fire letter sequences out of which all of the races came out of. There was one original Lyran Christed pattern, one avatar pattern hominid form that had all of the flash line sequences that then were broken down into make different race strains. The Elohai family were appointed as the ones who would retain within their manifestations the coding that would allow all of the others to plug in and get their codes back so they could get out of time. The group of the Elohai family that was commissioned to do this was called the Emerald Order of the Azurite Council. This is where we get Azurite Temple. Okay? The Emerald Order is an ancient group of beings. So far ancient it loses its meaning in our context of time. But they were basically a group of the Elohai family avatars that agreed to stay in the time matrix, even though they could have expanded back out into ascension. They agreed to stay here to assist all of the stellar races back into evolving into the ascension codes as they are held within the Melchizedek Cloister, which means it gave the potential, or kept the potential, of every being down in here being able to become an ascended master again. We all started as ascended masters. Before we started as Turanisium, way up there, that's where we all started as. It's not a potential we have to get, it's a potential we have to remember how to expand back into, because it's always been there. Okay, so the Emerald Order of the Azurite Council was a group of beings out of the Elohai family. They were avatar collectives in harmonic 4, pre-matter, liquid, light. Okay. The Emerald Order seeded down in the next harmonic a version of itself, and they kept doing this all the way down. So those codes would be represented in all of the harmonics, making them available to the gene pools in all of the race strains going down. Now the Emerald Order Elohai seeded in harmonic 3 etheric matter a race called the Anahazi. Not Anunnaki. Anahazi, okay? The Anahazi races, also known as Syrian whites, because that's what they look like if you see them. They look like white beings with the big slanted eyes and that kind of thing. They're an etheric race, etheric matter density, which looks kind of ghost-like to us if we see them. The Anahazi were commissioned by the Emerald Order above them to become representatives of the Emerald Order in that level of etheric matter density. The Anahazi represents the first etheric matter hominid imprint that all hominids in the whole 15-dimensional scale from harmonic 3 and below fit into. To re-evolve back out of time, every being will have to re-evolve back through that imprint to go back into liquid light, Christos, and then back into Rishi, and then back into expansion into ascended mastery. There is one pattern, one hominid pattern, that all hominids emerged out of. There's much diversity after that point. But the Anahazi in harmonic 3 were appointed the guardians of holding the codes of that pattern together so it would always remain as a potential for any race, no matter how far digressed it got and how far the codes and flashline sequences got messed up. So you have the Anahazi in harmonic 3. In harmonic 4, we have the Emerald Order of the Azurite Council. Now, the Azurite Council part comes from the ultra-terrestrial collective. You have the Melchizedek Cloister, and that has numerous families within the non-dimensionalized levels of the energy matrix, ultra-terrestrial families. The Azurite Council is the primary head family in the Melchizedek Cloister organization. They kind of direct what happens in the time matrix here. So the Azurite Council is, they're ascended masters, ultra-terrestrial collectives of cosmic consciousness, if you want to look at it that way. So we have up in ascended mastery levels, Melchizedek Cloister. Then we have the Azurite Council, which creates the Emerald Order, of the Elohai, which creates the Anahazi. The Anahazi were originally seeded into what we look up in the sky and see as the Lyran system, but in harmonic 3, etheric matter density. Because the other groups of the Elohai families and Seraphi families that were also creating things in the lower harmonics began to create things that were at war with the things that held the light codes and were trying to destroy them. There were battles that happened in the harmonic 3 etheric matter density of the Lyran system. And the original planet that was supposed to be the planet that went with Earth, Gaia, Terra, Earth, all of that lineup, was actually destroyed. The morphogenetic template for this planetary system was blown apart, and this planetary system was plugged into something else, but it wasn't its original flash line pattern, its original scalar pattern. The Anahazi race from Lyra and Harmonic 3 had originally been inhabitants of that etheric planet. Now we have Gaia as etheric Earth. Gaia became something different because of what happened one harmonic above with the avatars. We had a pattern. Our Maharic shield of the planet was called Aramatena. Okay? The Anahazi and the Emerald Order were the guardians of Aramatena, the planetary flashline sequences, not just the hominid flashline sequences. In Harmonic 4, that pattern was literally blown up. What that translated down to in Harmonic 3 was the races of Lyra, the Anahazi races, fled. There was a group of them that kept the Emerald Order coding that was moved to a different part of the morphogenetic structure of the Harmonic 3 universe, which corresponds to our Sirius star system. So they began as Lyran, and then they became Sirian. So the Anahazi, which is the original race imprint for all the hominids, that carries the full ascension codes for not just us, but everything else in this time matrix and hominid form, are considered Lyran, Sirian, Anahazi, the Sirian whites. They seeded the Azurite races, which some people who are doing contact, you see contact and stuff, they know the blues. There's a blue race. It's shown in the mythologies of Hindu literature. It's shown in Egyptian literature. Blue people. Yes, there were blue people. They were created in the next harmonic down by the Anahazi. We had Anahazi in Harmonic 3, right? Harmonic 2 in the Sirius star system. The Anahazi created the Azurite race, the Syrian blues. This is our lineage. This is our stellar lineage before we became human. The patterns we had to pass through just to get into a human imprint. Okay, so we will all, in our higher levels, have what at this point is future time incarnations that are in each of these race streams. Okay, now I have to take this piece by piece because I can really confuse you if I don't try. Okay, the Lyran Syrian, Emerald Order, Anahazi, and Azurite genetic imprint. That chain of identity that I just explained coming down, race identity, was the seed into which 12 other intergalactic mutated families were spliced into to form the Turanicium imprint that was the original human form. It was the seed coming down from Emerald Order or Melchizedek, down through Azurite Council, through Emerald Order Elohai, into Anahazi, into Azurite Syrian Blue race, finally into the Turanicium race. And then the Turanicium race into the 12 tribes that became the human race. This is our stellar heritage. These are the genetic, the scalar wave, the flashline sequences we need to reaccrete into our DNA in order to get ourselves into full expansion out of the time matrix. Right now we just got to worry about getting the gene code started enough to get through the changes that are going to be happening in the next 12 years. Okay? But that is the progression. And it's the first time this has not been convoluted, because for thousands of years some of the races from Harmonic 2 would come in and make themselves look like creator gods, like the Elohim, which are different than the Elohai. Okay, you want to put up the next one? We'll get into this because this is causing lots of confusion these days. There are Elohim communicating with channels from here across the oceans and to England and all other countries. They're starting to talk to their family down here. They're starting to talk to the humans, and what many of the Elohim are saying is, we created you. Just listen to us and we'll teach you how to be good humans. They're not teaching you ascension. They're not teaching you about flashline sequences, DNA, and how to get your codes back. They're teaching you, we're your parents. Listen to us. You have to ask yourself, why? Why? If they know, and if they're up there, they already know this stuff, why are they not teaching what the Azurites are teaching, which is the mechanics of how it works, so you can put it together and become independent and grow up to be just like them, because they don't want you to grow up to be just like them. They're parents that are a little nervous that the kids might grow up and be more than they are, and they don't trust us totally. The Elohim, here's where they came from. We had, entering in Harmonic 4, we'll start with, the Elohai Emerald Order families. Okay, they had a 30 to 48 strand, what's called an Emerald Sun DNA configuration. Remember, the 12 strand was a Diamond Sun configuration. Well, this is called the Emerald Sun DNA configuration. 30 to 48 strands, 30 to 48 flash line sequences that would allow not only the 15 dimensions of consciousness here to be assimilated, not only that plus its other 15 on the other side, giving you the 30 from the anti-particle universe, but also the 18 codes and their reverse from the 3 levels of the energy matrix. The Elohai Emerald Order carried the ability to embody what's called, or to have access while embodiment, to what is called the Eckhart identity level, which is Ascended Master Level 3. Okay? Understanding this is important as we get talking more about who indigos are. All right, now, here's where Elohim pop up. When we had the Elohai races in Harmonic 4, remember I said how some of the races of the Elohai family and the Seraphai families digressed and created race lines that had their flash line sequences off, that they were stuck in time because they didn't have the connections anymore that would allow them to plug in all those frequencies to expand. Now, the fallen Elohim, they were Elohai once in Harmonic 4. They severed certain connections and reduced themselves to only 11 flash line sequences in order to get out from under the control of their Rishi identities in Harmonic 5. It was like a rebellion. We don't want to listen to you anymore. We don't want to do the law of one. We're having too much fun convoluting ourselves to the point where we don't make any sense to ourselves anymore. They decided that they were going to be creator gods without God, without that whole collective of consciousness. That any being that really reaches ascended mastery knows you can't divide it up in parts and expect that to work for very long. You have to recognize we are all one and all individual at the same time. And with the code convolution, or getting distorted flash line sequences in their consciousness and twists in their consciousness and the way they looked at things, the part of the Elohai family that decided to rebel against working with the higher councils, they became the Elohim. Some of them have evolved since then and rejoined the Elohai families. Now, these beings are awesome. If you see these beings, you get your D4 vision turned on and they come down to visit you, they are gorgeous. They are these white, you can't even describe them. They're like living light energy forms with sort of not quite human features and large eyes when they want to show you that much detail. They carry a presence with them that is awesome, and it just makes your heartstrings sing. You just feel, mama, you know. Your body, whether you're dealing with an Elohai or an Elohim, when that comes into your frequency, one of those consciousness, your body cells cry out, mama, because it feels the flash line sequence identification, even if it's not complete. So humans here can be so seduced by Elohim, who don't have their act together completely either, simply because of that biological identification of consciousness. And that's what's happening here. There are lots of Elohim channels at this point. Those people don't know if they're dealing with Elohim that are trying to help them re-evolve, or they're trying to trap them into another loop of evolution like we've been in for the last 22,000 years, actually. There's been things that happened because of the Elohim family lines that mutated our race down here worse than it ever had to be. We need to make the distinction between Elohai, higher, and Elohim. And over here, in the Seraphai families, some people are bringing out information that, you know, the Seraphim are all the bad guys. Then it kind of gets put over into the Seraphai family lines. Not all Seraphai family lines are negatively oriented. Only some of them are. Just like with the Elohai family lines, we had the Seraphai. Now, they were able to hold, they had something called the gold sun matrix, DNA matrix. It could hold 24 to 30 strands, flash line sequences, levels of consciousness. They were seeded primarily into the Arcturus and Andromeda galaxies in Harmonic 4. And they created their own race lines, which became involved with ours later. Then there was a group of them. And this is ones we're having big problems with these days. Okay, they're back. All right, the Seraphim, that again, just like the Elohim over there, decided we're going to run our own universe. Don't want to cooperate with the higher guys anymore. Created their own race strains. They unplugged their flashline sequences to get out from under the impulsing coming from their higher parts and reduced themselves to a 10-strand pattern. But at least they could rule in 10 dimensions of reality. When a being or a group of beings cuts off part of their flash line sequences, there's a little catch-22. They become finite unless they feed off other things. If you have your flash line sequences hooked up through the 15 dimensions and into the energy matrix, you have a perpetual supply of energy and consciousness moving through you. You are an eternal being. It's just continually recycling, changing form. You don't go away or disintegrate or reduce yourself into space dust for something else to use as creative fuel. When you sever the strands, you become a finite being that has to take energy from something else in order to self-sustain. That's what this group of seraphim did. Now, these are in harmonic 4. These are avatars. They're liquid light, dark avatars. They created race strains down the harmonics, just like the good seraphim, or seraphi did, just like the convoluted Elohim did. And these guys aren't quite as messed up as these guys. Okay, the seraphim are the ones that created the real big nasties, as we call them. The Elohim are like in between the two. And the Elohai are the ones who still retain the codes of ascension for the races. What the seraphim created in the next harmonic first was one of the major things that have given us problems here. They were in the Orion star system, etheric matter density, and they were winged Dracon. They looked like dragons with wings and tails. Like a lot of our devil mythology comes from a cellular imprint of understanding that race, because once upon a time they interacted here and they forcefully crossbred with humans to create a hybrid strain called the Dracos, which is actually focused in Nibiru right now and is starting to mess with this race again. They're back, and it's serious business. They have 10-strand, what's called the black sun DNA matrix. It's called the black sun because in order to have that independence that they created, they not only unplugged everything above 10 strands, they reversed the order of the fire letter sequences in the rest. They completely turned the consciousness inside out. They do not have the ability to plug into the rest of the dimensional scale, which gives them a consciousness that cannot cognate anything but itself and its own needs. If you ever looked in a shark's eyes, like on pictures and on TV, there's this blank stare there. These guys are eating machines, okay? You can go up to a shark and say, you know, I'm a really special being and it's really not a good idea to eat me. Do you think it's going to care? It has no cognition level to have compassion or to think about you in that form. You are just fuel, but it is biologically driven to consume. This is the level of consciousness, but amplified by 11 or 10 dimensions that you're dealing with the draconian matrix. It's an avatar matrix of liquid light beings that are majorly screwed up. Okay, I'll put it in very loose slang down here. Very twisted consciousness. They need more help than anybody in the time matrix. They are so stuck here that they have had to turn themselves into the epitome of evil just to self-sustain, where they will suck energy off anything they can get their claws into or their flashline sequences hooked into, just to self-sustain themselves. At some point when we evolve, and the ones that are in higher evolution are trying to help these guys to get their coding back, because if they get their flashline sequences back, they start to get more and more of that energy supply coming from source. But they're still in such a twisted frame of consciousness that they're afraid of the higher light. They're afraid of connecting with their rishi. And in their fear, just to survive, they have to consume. So it's like a very ancient drama that's still going on today. When we get down into what they created a reptilian version of Anunnaki. But they didn't create the first Anunnaki. This is where you get over here. Back over to the Elohai families. Remember, the Elohai families in the next harmonic, down harmonic 3, created various things. One of the first things in the hominid forms they created was the Lyran Syrian Anahazi. They were the ones that held the codes of ascension. I'll just refer to those flashline sequences, the right DNA patterns that get you all the way up as the codes of ascension, because that's what it's all about here. Evolution is about restructuring the codes of ascension so you get full mastery over manifesting and demanifesting wherever you want in the 15-dimensional time matrix and the energy matrix beyond it. Okay, so we have the Anahazi in harmonic 3. At the same time, down in harmonic 3, the digressive Elohim family, who didn't have any more than 11 flashline sequences anymore, created a version of itself in harmonic 3 called the Anu. This is where we get the stories that are popping up these days in the ancient histories about the Anu races. And there's a lot of mythology from the Syrian star system primarily involved with Anu. And Anu was a god and all these kind of things. Anu was a race of beings created by fallen Elohim. Like, it's like, let's get it straight already. Before these guys that are channeling stuff, telling us that Anu were the ancient gods, bow down to these guys. Don't do this. These are Elohim families. Elohim, we can love Elohim, but we can say, excuse me, there is something higher. And if you aren't teaching me about ascension directly, you're withholding something from me that you know about, and that means you have an agenda here. What is your agenda? We need to start interacting intelligently with what's happening here, because we're having contact. Now, here's where we'll get to understand where indigos come in. Okay? Not so much over here right now. We have the Anu in harmonic 3 out of the Elohim. We have, in the good guy, Sarah's families, the Seraphite families, the Sarahs and the Sarahs, which later crossed with the Syrian blues and got involved with our Egyptian lines to recalibrate the gene code in our race to some degree. They're trying to help us. Now here, there are several race strains created in different reality systems. Like when we have Palladians talking to us through channels and that kind of stuff now, they're not just Palladians. It's like Earthians. There's a lot of different people here. You know, when you're talking to Palladians, are you talking to the good ones? Are you talking to the draconian ones? Which ones are you talking to? We need to be able to ask these questions. Okay. When the harmonic 3 Anahazi came down and created their versions of races down here, they created the Azarites, the blue race. We ended up with this family line here through the Hibernians creating Anunnaki. We took Hibernians, we combined them with some of the draconian matrices over there, and we ended up with the Dracos Anunnaki here. We ended up with, there's actually an Anunnaki strain that came in with these, which was a little different than the basic Anu pattern. But when you deal with Anu instead of Anahazi, Anus are the ones that became the Anunnaki lines. They became very twisted up with the dark sun, the black sun matrices. And it's not that one group of consciousness is good, one is bad. It's that one has its ascension codes and its ability to cognate the law of one and to therefore act humanely and lovingly, and the other has lost the ability to do that. And you don't lay yourself down before them and say, well, because you're higher evolution, go ahead, lead me. Because remember sharks. Sharks don't think about their food. They just eat it. Okay? We are energy systems down here. And the ones from higher evolution that are messed up perceive us like sharks perceive food. That's all. They don't realize we have something else besides that to offer. They don't care. We need to understand these things and what's going on, because it's affecting the indigo drama right now. It's also affected our ancient stellar history forever and ever. When we come down in harmonic 2, our race strain goes into the Syrian and Palladians. They were seated in both the harmonic 2 Syrian and Palladian race, planetary systems. The Azarites, which were the blue hominid that came out of the Anahazi, white, Syrian whites. Okay, then there was various race strains that came down here. Out of there, when we get down to about here, this was the Emerald Order. They're called Orifeme. This is where the experiment was done to try to take the coding, the primary coding of all the other interstellar races, put it into the basic Emerald Order imprint to create a new hominid line that the consciousness that was stuck in the other forms could build up codes enough to evolve into. So it could evolve out of the time matrix through what would become the human pattern. The first level of the human pattern started in harmonic 2 with the Emerald Order Orifeme. And Or refers to light. These were good guys. They had 30 to 48 strand capacity, that Emerald Sun matrix. Then they created a little smaller version of themselves in harmonic 2 still, plain old Orifeme. Okay? They had 24 to 30 strand capacity. Yeah, reduced it a little bit. Into the Orifeme were seated the Turanicium, which were the 12 imprints from the other stellar races, and it created the full Turanicium 1 race. That's where it became Turanicium. Orifeme became Turanicium and human by adding the other patterns of the 12 races that needed help in their evolution. So we have the Turaniciums created now. Out of those came two primary divisions, and this is the story is told in the Secrets of Amente book a bit, where again the Anunnaki ones from over here and from over there, the middle guys and the really bad guys, interbred with some of the Turanicium, interbred with some of the Orifeme, which means you create some really high-coded, nasty beings. Yeah, there's a lot of heavy artillery created in the negative side by combining some of these very high-coded races with the distorted races. Like the Azrael, they were actually avian, getting the wing things from the Seraphi lines. They were blue. And they became with the dark angels in our history. They were the real negative dark angels that have messed with us for a very long time. So I showed some extra stuff that I don't have to cover here today on these charts, just so you see where some of the pieces fit. So if you hear somebody channeling Palladians, put up your Maharic seal, that pillar of light, before you go in, just in case they're transmitting frequencies that you don't want in your flashline sequences. Okay, now we get down here again. Orifeme came from Emerald Order, Orifeme, Ternicium. Ternicium's got messed up with the Anunnaki coding and became two races. They split into one that went into a reptilian type of human called the Bellicudium, and another that was a purified version, bringing the codes back to what the Orifeme were supposed to be, which is called the Adami Kudman. That was the pattern used, the Adami races. This is where stories of Adam come from. The Adami races were created. They were restructuring the imprint again and seeding it in 12 small pieces down here in harmonic 1. So the imprint could re-evolve down here, then we'd evolve back into the Adami Kudman, then we'd evolve into the Ternicium, then into the Orifeme, Emerald Order Orifeme. We progress all the way up to get our ascension codes back. When we understand this progression here, we can begin to understand where indigo children fit. Okay. We have indigo children here. These are a hybrid experiment that's taking place once again, because we have the higher ones of higher evolution realizing that right now we have some of these guys and those guys coming in here trying to hijack evolution. They're doing hybridization programs. Some of the UFO abduction stuff are by the negative groups, and they are trying to create hybrid versions of themselves to take over this place. Because they have the ability to do that if they want to. If there was no intervention, the human race on this planet would be hijacked again, completely out of its 12-strand capacity, forget its higher strand capacity. So there are arrangements being made where some of the negative sides are deciding they don't want to be so negative after all, and they're asking for help from some of the lighter sides. So there's negotiations being made all up and down the interdimensional scale. This is when the angels choose what side they're on, And it's coming down to hybridization programs running by each agenda here. We have the Elohim running their particular agenda, which is more interested in helping the Anunnaki races, since they were their Anu races, than helping the human race by itself. They don't want to hurt the human race. They're just willing to take the human and combine it with Anunnaki, realizing that the Anunnaki code is so strong that it will override the 12-strand. The Anunnaki will pick up the missing 12-strand and get its code, but it will unravel the human gene code back to a 10. It's not an evolutionary experiment that's in our best interest. It's in the Anunnaki best interest, but at our expense. That's why it's not endorsed by the Azurite Council or the Emerald Order. It is supposed to be win-win for everybody. In the law of one, there are win-win solutions that everybody can get what they need from. This matrix is not cooperating with that. Some of them are going to be coming over on this side the more weird things get between now and 2012 when it all comes to a head. Over there, they just want to take over the planet because they want the stargates that are at the center of this planet. They don't care what they have to do to the race here. They want one world order control. They're trying to do mind control here. And they're trying to hybridize a version of themselves here that can take over the planet. That's their only concern of the human lineage. It has codes that are compatible with the atmospheric conditions on Earth. They're trying to get that higher coding to bring in their higher levels of consciousness into form here so they can become the dominant force of this planet. Then we have these guys, the good guys over here saying, these guys don't stand a chance if we don't intervene. And they have intervened. That intervention is the indigo children. The indigo children are hybridized gene code that that involve the full coding that goes up. They're not just Adami imprint humans. They're not just Ternicium with the 12th strand. Some of them are Orifeme with 24 to 30 strand capacity. Some of them are Emerald Order. The indigos returning. The indigos coming into this race cycle where they normally would not belong, and the only reason they're being put here is because we're in big trouble if they don't come.